Welcome to the Aging Well podcast, where we explore the science, stories, and strategies that help us live longer, healthier, and more purposeful lives. I'm your host, Dr. Jeff Armstrong. My guest is a leading voice in nutritional science and longevity, Renee Fitton. Renee is a longevity dietitian and the director of education at L-Nutra, the company behind the Prolon fasting-mimicking diet. With a strong background in clinical nutrition and a passion for translating research into accessible strategies, Renee specializes in helping people, especially women over 40, optimize their health without making drastic lifestyle changes. In this conversation, we'll explore how fasting-mimicking diets offer powerful support during midlife, including their role in weight management, hormonal balance, and cellular health. Renee breaks down the science, clears up common misconceptions, and shares realistic ways to integrate the benefits of fasting into everyday life and help us to age well. Renee, welcome to the Aging Well podcast. Let's start by just having you kind of introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be a nutritionist for a company like L-Nutra.
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be on this podcast. I call myself a longevity dietitian for a number of reasons that I'll explain in a moment. So I could not feel more at home on the Aging Well podcast. This is a topic and a space that is so important, and I think is finally starting to get the attention that it deserves. So that is, as I mentioned, I'm a longevity dietitian. I got my master's degree in longevity, health span, healthy aging from one of the only nutrition programs in the world that focuses on health span through nutrition, or supporting healthy aging, not just living longer, but living healthier longer through nutrition, out of USC. And the founder of that program is none other than Dr. Walter Longo, who is also one of the leading longevity researchers focusing on nutrition and longevity. And so was very, very lucky to have him as my mentor and get to study under him through that program. So even prior to that, spending a lot of time just uncovering how, really the underpinnings of how nutrition can support healthy aging, looking at the biochemistry, the physiology, not just, the outcomes, which are incredibly important, but also how it works and why it works, so that there's a complete picture as to what we can do and how we can use nutrition and the food that we eat, which is such a big part of our lifestyle, to help us live longer, but again, healthier as well.
So we've talked about the fasting mimicking diet before on this podcast. In fact, it was, I think, episode 192 that we had the CEO of your company, L-Nutra, Dr. Antown, on the podcast. But for the listeners who might be a little bit more new to the concept, what exactly is fasting mimicking, the fasting mimicking diet, and how does it differ from traditional intermittent fasting?
Oh, well, this is a bit of a loaded question, actually. But first, let's just go high level. Fasting mimicking is kind of what it sounds like. It is designed to mimic a water-only fast by still allowing the individual to eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, your whole meals of the day, but your body believes that it is still in that water-only state. And what we're best known for is the 5-day programs, where you're not just doing this for maybe like a 16, 18-hour daily fast, but you're letting your body get into a deep water-only type fast for 5 days, getting some deep cellular benefits, things like autophagy that we'll dig into, I'm sure, but really maximizing these benefits of longer fasts. So yes, you get to eat, which is probably the biggest difference here. But the other difference is that you are allowing yourself to get into these extended fasts in a safer and a certainly easier way than through water-only fasting. And the important difference that we have to make with short fasts to long fasts is that while there are benefits to shorter fasts, or there can be benefits to shorter fasts that are done daily, which we call intermittent fasting. These are fasts that are anything even within a 2-day range. So it's actually, you can still fast for 2 days and it still be considered a shorter fast, which is kind of crazy. Once you get over that 2-day mark, that's when we start calling it prolonged fasting. The reason we start making that differentiation is that once your body has stayed in this fast for at least those 2 days and start getting into that 3-day range, your body starts adding and getting additive to some of the benefits that are happening beyond just some of the metabolic benefits, like switching your fuel sources, burning fat for fuel, using ketones for energy that you can do in these shorter fasts. You also start adding in these really deep benefits that are happening at the cellular level, tapping into autophagy, this deep cellular cleanup. I like to think of it as a vacuum cleaner for our cells, or a spring cleaning at the cellular level that you are just not able to tap into in these shorter fasts. So those are going to be the two major differences that we'll see.
Yeah, I've done 24-hour fasts before and been miserable. And I actually did do the Prolon fast for 5 days, I think last fall. And I was amazed at how, these tiny little packages of food can keep me sustained for 5 days. I mean, I felt great. I ended up losing 8 pounds. And it wasn't really necessarily about the weight loss. It was really just about kind of that kind of body cleanse and kind of getting into the autophagy and just kind of the lifestyle kind of cleanse. And I was amazed at how good I felt at the end of that.
Absolutely.
It also got me drinking tea a lot more.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And in the 5-day kits that are designed by Prolon and now another company, L-Nutra Health, they leverage teas like hibiscus tea, which just on its own has incredible longevity benefits. So phenomenal. But beyond the teas, and I have to mention that for anybody who's unfamiliar with the fasting mimicking diet, the fasting mimicking diets designed by Prolon and L-Nutra will deliver a kit directly to your door, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, in individual daily boxes, making it super simple. And inside you will have real food. People always think, oh, it's going to be teas and broths. No, it's so much more than that. You're getting nut-based breakfast bars. You're getting even a little chocolate crisp at the end of the day. You're getting olives. You're getting crackers. You're getting soups. So, it's actually relatively hearty food. And so I'm glad that you were able to experience that and get to see how, even though it is, yes, still calorie restricted, it's quite a bit of food. And you also noted that weight loss, and I have to add that it's not just any weight loss. This is the kind of weight loss where we see muscle protection, which is, I think now in the world of nutrition and longevity, people are really starting to harp on the importance of protecting our muscle. And this is a solution where we get the best of both worlds. Yes, we'll get some weight loss, but we also are keeping that very, very valuable muscle, which is really quite hard to do, even with like a Mediterranean diet, which there's been a clinical study that was published just last year comparing the fasting mimicking diet to the Mediterranean diet, showing equivalent outcomes in terms of heart health, which is what the Mediterranean diet is most renowned for, and also showing equivalent results in terms of total weight loss. But the Mediterranean diet showed about almost 5 pounds of muscle loss, whereas the fasting mimicking diet showed none. So this is really, really important in terms of when we're looking at weight loss, just even just kind of what we like to call the cherry on top of this program, it's the right kind of weight.
So what makes fasting mimicking diets particularly supportive for women in their 40s, 50s, and beyond?
So important. And thank you for qualifying also 40s, 50s, and beyond, because it's important to differentiate fasting for women in their reproductive years to those entering into perimenopause and then menopause. Each cycle of life is going to warrant slightly different needs and slightly different recommendations when it comes to fasting. I generally will, no matter who you are, always recommend men or women, recommend the fasting mimicking diet because it is safer and because it is more muscle protective, and because it is just a little softer on the body, generally speaking. Now, I'm sure any of the women out here listening have heard at least once that they shouldn't fast. And usually the reason why people are suggesting this is because fasts are, by definition, a stress on the body. Now, the stress on the body is generally recognized as a hormetic stress or a positive stress, but it is still a stress nonetheless. And in any body that is already stressed, that can just compound into not necessarily a positive. Now, with the fasting mimicking diet, because we're adding nutrition, we are actually reducing some of that stress and difficulty and safety concerns that we would see with water only fasting. So this is just really important, again, for really anybody, but especially women whose bodies are taxed or stressed at any given time. And unfortunately, most of our bodies are today. We're dealing with a lot. Now, on top of that, specifically in perimenopause and menopause, where we start seeing this decline in estrogen and other reproductive hormones, it's really important to know that while these are very strongly associated with fertility and reproduction, these hormones are really important for a lot of things. And that includes protecting our muscle. That includes allowing a healthy blood sugar regulation. All of these things are actually managed and supported by estrogen. So when this decline happens, we will see other things start changing. And that's, for example, decline in muscle mass that is seen for a number of reasons. Yes, we often see that there might be a change in exercise, but even women who are keeping their exercise stable, because of the decrease in estrogen and just the natural effects of aging, that same workout might not yield the same results. And so we're losing muscle mass, which decreases our metabolic rate, which makes it easier to gain weight, which creates this vicious cycle. So especially at this time of life, it is critical that we are using solutions that are protecting our muscle. And I've already talked a little bit about the muscle protection aspect of fasting mimicking, but this becomes especially critical at this phase. Another thing, as I mentioned, that happens when estrogen decreases is that our insulin sensitivity decreases, or our insulin resistance increases. We become less able to take the blood sugar increases and funnel that into our cells. It just kind of floats around, causing havoc in our body. And this can increase the risk of prediabetes, which we see increasing once we hit perimenopause and menopause, and type 2 diabetes. So fasting mimicking has been able to show improvements in insulin sensitivity. We even have preclinical trials showing improvements and regeneration of beta cells, which are what produce insulin in our body. So because the fasting mimicking diet is able to work at this root cause approach, we're able to impact so many levels of this problem. So these are just some of the reasons why I think fasting mimicking is so powerful at this stage of life, and why I also think it's relevant for really anybody, because insulin resistance is a huge problem in the United States and really in the world today. Muscle loss is a huge problem across the board. And it's important that we're taking and leveraging strategies that keep that in mind and is able to support all of these things.
And I would say we could probably translate that also to bone loss as well.
Yes. So bone loss and osteopenia, osteoporosis also increase as we age, but especially in women. We've been able to show with a fasting mimicking diet that bone density is preserved. And we can do this through relatively gold standard approaches like DEXA scans and things like that, which show that even with multiple cycles, that is preserved. And that's another thing that is often called out as a problem with fasting. I also like to remind people that the fasting mimicking diet is a 5-day program that is designed to only be done a few times a year. So yes, we are causing a positive hermetic stress that will cause the body to go into all of this wonderful cleanup and repair, but we're only inducing this a few times a year, as opposed to every single day intermittent fasting, which will induce some moderate amounts every single day. And so you can imagine that because we're only doing this a few times a year, it can be really beneficial. And it also allows you a lot more time in between to focus on full, complete nutrition, that including adequate amount of protein, adequate amount of calcium, adequate amount of vitamin D to support muscle and bone density.
And also to support exercise as well, I would assume, because I was fortunate when I did mine, I just kind of set the timing to when I was doing a deload. So I wouldn't have to really test whether it would diminish my capacity to exercise. And so that makes it a lot easier, because you don't have to you're not deloading more than maybe once every month, couple months or so.
Exactly.
But, if you try and exercise and you're not eating, and that's what bothers me about intermittent fasting is that I'm a morning exerciser. So how am I supposed to get up, exercise, and then not eat for another 6 hours or so before I can begin to recover? So I lose all that potential gain from the exercise.
Absolutely. I mean, even with intermittent fasting, we always recommend that people, if you're going to do it, if that's something that you feel like is beneficial in your practice, that you should be shifting that window to making sure that you're having nutrition first thing in the morning, and then move up your last meal. That's where the intermittent fasting should be. It should be in the evening, where our bodies, through circadian nutrition, actually do worse at metabolizing and leveraging and moving sugar into our bodies. Our insulin sensitivity declines at the end of the day. And this is just a natural part of our circadian rhythms, or like what I like to call it, our cells' schedule that they follow day after day after day. They're very much on a set schedule based off of a 24-hour clock. So we really do need to live within that schedule and support that schedule by having a healthy breakfast and consuming our meals in that shifted earlier window. So while my general recommendation and the scientific research supports shorter intermittent fasting windows between 12 to 14 hours and not pushing for these really, really long windows every day, on top of that is making sure that that window is also shifted earlier in the day.
Yeah, that was one of the lessons I learned from your CEO. It was the circadian intermittent fasting. And it's like, that makes total sense. And so now it's that struggle to try and force my eating into earlier parts of the day, because it's still kind of hard and, typical schedule to really end your eating before 7 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's essential.
And absolutely. It is. It's really, really important. It's cool to look at some of the research, and I would urge anybody that finds this interesting to go check it out. But you can see drastic differences in glucose response, or the way that your blood sugar changes based off of when you ate your last meal. And those changes can persist and continue all the way through the next morning and the next day even. So if you're eating later in the evening, that might mean that your blood sugar spikes higher or stays elevated longer, even the next day. So it's not just within that window that you maybe had a late meal. It can persist, even 24 hours later. So that I think is really important for listeners to be mindful of. And if you are going to have something later in the evening, trying to keep it something that is higher fat and protein as opposed to higher carbohydrate, because that's actually really where the body is struggling in the later evenings. That's why I always will recommend, if you have this late night craving and you really need something, there's a product released by Prolon called the Fasting Bar that is designed to keep your body in a fasted state. It's primarily nuts and healthy fats combined to give your body some nutrition to curb that hunger without spiking glucose and without dropping ketones compared to water alone. So it gives you the benefits.
And I think for the listener and the viewer, it's important for me to point out too that if they go to your website, it's probably one of the most referenced websites I've ever been on, when it comes to products, because oftentimes I'll go on and there's a list of references, but if you really kind of dive into the articles that they supply, it's like, well, that's not really related to this. But there's there was more than 25 articles, I'm sure, on that.
We're now over 40 clinical trials deep. So we are very committed to having supporting literature on all of our products. I think the 5-day fasting mimicking diet has the most, but we also have clinical trials even on the fasting bar and some of the other products as well. So it is critical for us that whatever we are promoting is highly based in research. We have now over $30 to $40 million in NIH government funding for the research, because there is so much excitement and opportunity in this world. There is now over 20, or I think actually we might even be at 30 research partners that are the best of the best. We're talking Mayo Clinic, Stanford, Harvard, USC. These are the people doing this research. So it is highly evidence-based.